Welcome back to Healing Reflections with Michaelia Nobles and Dr. Laura Pitts-Bowles, where we have conversations about growth and restoration. We are here talking about another good topic. Since it's February, it's the month of love. But before we jump into that, Dr. Laura Pitts-Bowles, thank you again for just coming back and giving us this information. You are teaching us young bucks something every conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoy these conversations.
I do as well. I be learning. I be going home and writing in my little book. Like, I learned this. It's literally this way. You already heard we're going to be talking about romance and talking about how just the overall topic of romance. There's so much we can dive into, but what I want to focus on for the beginning is redefining what romance is. A lot of people don't know what true romance is because romance is definitely shown different on social media, definitely in the movies, because you see, like I said, the cars, the trips, the flying out. You see I want the fairy tale. It's always the toxic kind of love, but then y'all break up, and then y'all come back together, and it's like, I done found true love. But how do you feel overall this online presence has affected how we see romance?
It's a fantasy reel. You know, I tell people you have a fantasy reel and you have a real, or EAL real, right? And I tell folks, this is not Cinderella. This is not Sleeping Beauty. This is real life. And you do yourself a tremendous disservice by navigating life in that fantasy reel mode. It's so much more complex than that. And when people are living life floating in the clouds, walking around with the rose-colored glasses on and the woo-woo-woo mindset, you're really setting yourself up for failure. And it's so important to be able to understand what true romance is and why it's so dangerous.
Right. Since you said true romance, what coming from, your generation, because listen, we love wisdom, but what would you say true romance looks like for you, or just for anyone coming from a wiser perspective? Okay.
So here's the thing. If you are looking to build a relationship on romance, you're foolish. And I don't say that to be insensitive or disrespectful. Robert Sternberg, who was a psychologist at Yale, created what we call the triangular model of love. And he talks about love within the context of passion, intimacy, and commitment. And that romance piece falls under the passion piece. It's the physiological arousal. It's the woo-woo-woo. It's the chemistry. It's the sexuality piece of romance. But you can't build a relationship on that. And it's very, very fleeting. It's cool in the beginning. And the problem that so many people run into in their relationships, and while I always have a job where couples therapy is concerned, is because people get caught up in the romance. And then when the romance fades, it always does. It doesn't mean that you no longer love the person that you're with, but what it means is the honeymoon stage, that romance stage, is always going to fade. And then what? What do you have? People make the mistake of falling into these romantic situations without the intimacy piece, without the commitment piece that goes along with sustaining a healthy relationship. It's just based on physical, right? So if you have a relationship that's foundationally based on the chemistry, well, what happens when you're 58 and the Coke bottle shape is gone and the stamina is gone and the priority of, some of the other things that were the priority when you were younger, when those responsibilities have changed, where those needs have changed, right? And that's what people don't think about. And I tell people all the time, you're so focused on what you want that you don't give enough consideration to what you need. And what you need in order to sustain a healthy, fulfilling relationship is a whole lot more than romance.
You said a whole lot there. That was a lot. Listen, it was crazy. Just in Bible study, my bishop was just talking about how, the romance and how the honeymoon phase. So he was giving an example to something. But I just remember, like he said, it takes more than that.
Yeah.
It takes more than that. Like after a while, you got to continue to put the work in. Not even just with my bishop, but my uncle, rest his soul, told me the same thing. He's like, marriage, it takes work. You have your ups, you have your downs, but at the end of the day, if you wake up and you choose, you got to choose to stay married. You can't just be like, oh, I'm married. No, you got to choose, because you got to, every day you got to put in the work, because what your wife may get on your nerves, or your husband may get on your nerves.
Oh, they're going to.
Absolutely.
Don't say may.
They're going to.
It's undisputable. It's absolutely positively going to
One day you may love them, the next day you may be like, I can't stand you. But like you said, if you don't put in that extra work, it's always going to be like, oh, well, we just, I feel like that's why so many divorces happen. Because they go through that honeymoon phase. And granted, coming from a person who desires to be married and desires to have that long-term commitment, now I feel like understanding and going through, and that's why I was like checking off the boxes, understanding what's real, what's just a part of that fantasy, and it's getting like, oh, the grand gestures. Like, and I always, I had this been told me too many times, like, if it sounds too good to be true, 9 times out of 10, it ain't true.
That part right there.
It's not true. If they love bombing you in the beginning, that's just to get you in. There's something they don't, they trying to throw in there to let you know, or trying to show you. Until first they hook you, and then once they got you on that hook, that's it.
Can I speak to that for a second? Because there's 2 points that I think that it's important for our audience to be aware of. The first thing is, and I'm going to say this as PC as I possibly can, when you are standing at a loved one's casket, and the person that you're in a romantic relationship with is standing beside you, you're not thinking about the chemistry. You're not thinking about how they fulfill you in a sexually intimate way. You're thinking about, I just lost somebody that I love and care about, and does this person have the wisdom, the maturity, the true compassion for me to be emotionally available for me when I'm experiencing some of the most in-depth pain that I've ever experienced in my life as I'm preparing to put a loved one in the ground, okay? The second thing that I want to point out that so many people are not aware of that gets them caught up, research shows that there are 4 primary misconceptions that people come into relationships with. The first one is people make the mistake of thinking that because the romance is there, because the chemistry and the woo, and well, you know what, we was both raised Pentecostal, or we was both raised Catholic, or whatever. They make the mistake of thinking that they're going to expect the exact same things from the relationship. No. The second misconception that people come into the relationship with is they think that because everything is good and wonderful and great, that they're going to automatically sustain all of that as the relationship progresses. Wrong. The third misconception that people come into relationships with is that all of the bad stuff, your baggage, your unresolved trauma, all of your mommy issues and your daddy issues and your former partner issues, they think that all of that stuff is just going to miraculously go away because you're with this person, right? The fourth misconception that people make is that my partner is going to make me whole. A romantic partner does not deserve to have that type of pressure put on them. That no one person can make you whole. It requires individual, psychological, and spiritual work, if someone is of a spiritual foundation, to heal and to get free from the things that are keeping them bound. The other thing that people need to be mindful of is that, don't kill the messenger. Each of us is the common denominator in all of our relationships. So if you keep finding yourself in all of these broken and conflictual relationships, whether they be romantic relationships or friend groups or discord with your family members, look in the mirror. Because those broken and conflictual relationships are directly connected to your own personal deficiencies in the areas of problem solving and conflict resolution. And I don't care what the chemistry is. I don't care how hopelessly romantic he or she is. There's no amount of romance in the world that is going to heal all of the problems that come when you go into relationships with those misconceptions and others.
Oh, that was so much. But it's great that you open up the thing with the broken relationships. We're gonna switch into talking about healthy relationships versus toxic relationships. You know, as we were discussing earlier, we had someone come in and, wanted to bring us like, why do women, and we're going to change it from just women, but why do people in general choose a toxic relationship over a healthy relationship?
Because it validates the low opinion that they have of themselves. If you don't know what it's like, if you have not had an appropriate example, if you have not been to therapy or done self-work or taken it upon yourself to read information about what a healthy, fulfilling, and sustainable relationship looks like, how can you model that? Oftentimes, I would argue more times than not, people imitate their atmosphere. One of the questions that I ask during my intake session when I'm doing couples work is, what example have you had of a healthy, loving, and fulfilling relationship? And it's tragic to admit, but more times than not, my clients acknowledge that they did not have appropriate examples. That's problematic for me, and I mean it this way. If you are exposed to behavior that you clearly see is toxic, it's unhealthy, it's right? You have free will. You have a choice as a human being to not go down that road, to say, well, Dr. Pitts, this is how I am. I mean, that's all I know. I believe that's a cop-out. I get to choose. I get to choose if I'm going to replicate the dysfunction that I saw my parents engage in. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it felt. I certainly didn't appreciate it. So why would I replicate it? Why would I do that? Because it's easy. Because I don't know what's left or what's right. Well, guess what? You got a 50-50 chance of doing something different and better. But it takes courage to be an agent of change. And people are afraid to change. So you know what they do? One generation after the other, after the other, after the other, they set these poor examples for their children of what unhealthy looks like.
And I can agree to that with the unhealthy, because granted, when I grow up, my parents did the best they could, but I wasn't shown the right way of how a relationship should go. So growing up, even I started dating at a very young age. I started dating at 12. And at 12, I really didn't have the full understanding of dating.
You don't even know who you are at 12.
Exactly. But no, the crazy thing is, when I tell people this story, is they were like, what? You were I said, I literally thought I had found my husband at 12. I really thought I had found the love of my life at 12 years old. I was sitting there talking, and we trauma bonded as kids. His situation was very familiar with mine. The only thing it was, the roles were just reversed. So we thought okay, we can build a strong, because we know what we want. We want a different. We don't want what we had. So, but that expectation was damaging to us, because we couldn't be kids.
No.
I was holding him to a higher standard as, I'm like, okay, I need you to be like a man, but you're 13 years old.
Right.
You need me to be a woman, and I'm 12 years old.
Right.
We can't do that.
No.
But no, just going through that and then experiencing, because he cheated on me so many times. And like I said, choosing a healthy, and I had throughout that time, because we dated off and on for 3 years. And I was like, I finally let him go, let him know, say, hey, we can't even try to make this. I was 20 years old. I was like, we can't go. There's too much toxic in our relationship for it would never be healthy. Even us being grown, and at that point I was in therapy working on myself. I was like, but it's just too much there for me to even think it could be healthy. We were always toxic, and even just not dating him, but I just toxic to toxic to toxic to toxic to toxic. And it's not until I got 20, I turned 21, I was like, you know what? Some gotta give. I was like, I have been through too much. I done been cheated on too many times. I done went through too much. I said, we gotta look at myself now. And that's why I started doing the work. And then that was one of those questions. One of my old therapists, she got me right. But no, she literally was real hardcore, and I needed that, because I was like I said, I went to what I was used to.
Right.
And even if I got I had some good ones in there that that were really trying to understand and be that supportive, but I'm used to the
you
raw.
couldn't appreciate them.
I couldn't,
because you didn't have the appropriate level of self-worth, so you self-sabotaged.
Yes.
I don't deserve him. Why would I be okay with somebody treating me with decency and respect and adoration and all of these things? I've got these mommy issues, I got these daddy issues, I have these attachment ruptures, I got all these relationship fractures. I don't even deserve it. I don't even know how to treat him. Like, what do I do with all of that?
Exactly. And like you said, even if it's self-sabotage, like I'm like, you know what, I'll leave you to go to something toxic because I know what I'm getting out of that. But I had to stop. I was like, you are literally gonna you're not gonna get what you want. Right. It's not even not by getting, but you're not going to get what you need. And then, the whole 80-20 rule, which I want us to jump into that, the 80-20, you're only going to get 80% what you're going to need, and the 20% is what you're going to get what you want. And some people choose the 20 over the 80 anytime. But with me, I'm just like, hearing about that and going through, I was like, it's not about that to me. I was like, I need to figure out what is wrong with me while I keep allowing myself to get into these toxic relationships.
Those personal deficiencies, you got to figure out what they are.
And as soon as I started checking off, going through them, I said, okay, this is from
I have abandonment issues, I have rejection issues, I have fear of failure issues, I'm a people pleaser, I'm seeking external validation, I'm looking for approval. My worth is tied to how many times they tell me my shape is the bomb. My worth is connected to how pretty they tell me I am, how smart it's all of this external validation, but all of that need for external validation is tied to attachment wounds. It's tied to relationship fractures because you have a diminished sense of self. Because when you know your worth, when you know what you're deserving of, then it becomes easier for you to put the finger on the pulse of what do I need. Michaelia, a big part of the problem that people run into in their relationships is they have no idea what they need. They don't even know themselves. They are so busy navigating life inauthentically because they're comparing themselves to what they see on TikTok or Instagram or wherever, that they're not even true to who they are. They don't even know who they really are. So if you don't know who you really are, how can you possibly know what you really need? I've often said when I do premarital counseling, and it freaks people out, and I sort of kind of mean it literal, but I'll say it this way. When couples come to me to do their consultation, I'll say to them, I just want to let you know that if I can break you up, you should have never been getting married. And that freaks people out. And some people will walk away and won't proceed with premarital counseling. But think about that. That speaks volumes, right? I'm nobody. In the grand scheme of things of the relationship equation, I'm nobody. I'm just the therapist. So how could I possibly have the power to break you two up if your foundation is rock solid? What that means, if I were to reframe it and say it more gently, which I deliberately don't do because I want to see what people are made of, is, do you have the staying power? Are you coming to me for premarital counseling with a solid foundation that we can reinforce that's going to be instrumental in helping you to sustain a healthy and fulfilling marriage? But if you jump ship as soon as I say, well, if I can break you up, that speaks volumes to me. And you weren't going to be able to sustain the process anyway. But you got to think about that. Do I even know what I need? I'm going to give a tool that I want our audience to give a shot. You remember in chemistry class in high school where you did the litmus test?
Yes.
And you stuck the paper in, and if it turned purple, that meant that the water was acidic? I want you to do a relationship litmus test to tell you if you've been dealing with toxicity. And on a deeper level, this is what it looks like. You're going to get a piece of paper. You're going to create 3 columns. First column is going to be your needs. The middle column is going to be your wants. And the third column is going to be your red flags or your don't wants in a relationship. You want to create an exhaustive a list as you possibly can of things that you absolutely positively need. In other words, things that could potentially be non-negotiables in your relationship. Like, I really, really, really need these things. And then you want the second column to be your wants. I tell folks that's the icing on the cake, right? That's the bells of cake is good without icing. Let me just say that, right? So it's the icing on the cake. You want to make that wants list as exhaustive as you possibly can. And then the same thing for the don't wants or your red flag list, right? And then you're going to use a Likert scale between 1 and 10, with 1 being not very important and 10 being highly important. And you're going to give numeric value to everything that you put on each of those lists, right? From the most important to least important. The problem that a lot of people run into is, first and foremost, they have a very difficult time identifying what they need. Secondly, they can tell you everything that they want, but a lot of the wants are superficial. That's why cake is good without icing, because the icing is just extra, right? The red flag column, that's the column that people ignore. And I ask that all the time. So were any of these behaviors present in the beginning? 100% of the time people are like, well, yeah, well, why'd you ignore them? Because you have abandonment issues and you thought that you could fix them. You ain't Jesus. How were you possibly going to be able to fix them, right? So in that red flag column, if you rate something a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, that means that you don't really want to deal with that thing. It's important, but it's not. I tell people, keep an eye on those things. Because if they show up in the relationship, you need to be mindful, because anything that you don't address, it's the same thing as saying that behavior is okay, which means it can morph on you. If you rate something a 6, 7, or 8, those are behaviors that you're probably going to need to put some interventions in place. Whether the intervention is breaking up, the intervention might be couples therapy, the intervention might be meeting with your pastor, it could be a more in-depth conversation, right? 9s and 10s, they're deal breakers. Run. Squirt!
Gone.
See you, out of here, right? The problem that so many relationships run into is those relationships are smack dab sitting in the low-end items of your wants category and the high-ranked items of your red flag category. And the needs are a foreign concept. And then people wonder why their relationships are trash, because you're not making your needs a priority. And a big part of why you're not making your needs a priority is because you don't even know what they are, because you don't know who you are.
That's what you got to do. That is so much to be said right there. But you covered everything that literally is very much important for young people, not even just young people, just teenagers, kids.
People.
In general, you need to know who you are, because the world will constantly try to tell you who they think you are. But how can they know you if you wasn't created by the world? Right. So, and coming from my background, coming from a Christian background, that was very important. And then even the church I go to now, my first lady did a study of, we were going through a series of finding out who you are, and that was very instrumental to me as a young believer, just finding out who I am and understanding who I am in Christ and understanding my identity. And also that add to icing on the cake for me is like, this is added to my worth. Yeah. Because at this point, I did the list and everything, and I keep going through and I keep adding and I keep checking off, because as you evolve as a person and as you grow, your needs always need to be what's important. And that's one thing I've definitely, when I went through my journey of going through that, I made sure to put my top priorities as these are non-negotiables. Right. If you don't, if some people say, oh, you get one of the best 2 out of 3. No, I need all 3. Right. And you can't,
you're entitled to them.
Like, if you can't, and I feel like if you have just one of them, the 2 flows together. So if you missing that one critical piece, we can't talk. Right. And that's why I want to shift it to like affirming those boundaries in healthy relationships. After you've recognized, after you've done the work, now it's time to put them into place and not backing out. So what do you believe people are now choosing to do after they've done the work, but they just still don't want to enforce those boundaries?
Boundaries takes courage. And in order to have boundaries, you have to have consequences in place for violating them, right? If you don't deal with your abandonment issues, if you don't deal with your fear of failure issues, if you don't deal with your fear of rejection issues, it is going to be very difficult to put boundaries in place and to require people to honor them, because you're afraid of being alone. You're afraid of growing old with cats. You're afraid of not having kids, or you're afraid of not having a wife, or not being able to compare yourself to your cousins or your girlfriends who are getting married and having kids, or your homeboy who's, he's dating the same girl for the past 5, whatever the case may be. So you make the mistake of comparing yourself to others, and you can't do that. You have to run your race, and you have to decide your worth as it relates to these boundaries. I'll give you a prime quick example. My husband and I grew up together, and I literally had not seen him or talked to him since the day of his high school graduation. The day of his high school graduation, because he was a year behind me in school, I took a picture of him with the gentleman who ended up being the father of my child, and the other gentleman who ended up being my first husband, and a number of other guys that were our childhood friends. I took a picture of them. I hadn't seen my husband in almost 30 years. When he sent me a friend request on Facebook and we reached out, the very first conversation we had, first time in 30 years, we were on the phone for 5.5 hours. And one of the things that I said to him was, because people were like, oh my God, you said that on the first call. I did, because I don't play games. And I don't have time for you to waste my time.
Talk about
I said,
it.
hey, look, I have a history of trauma, and I've been in several abusive relationships. Those days are over. I've taken all the rear end whippings I'm going to take. I've taken all of the abuse, neglect, and the maltreatment that I'm going to tolerate. Like, I'm over that. I have that same standard in friendship, regardless, right? There's a certain way that I require people to treat me. If you can't honor that, this conversation can end right here. Because I'm not willing to even have a friendship with you if you can't honor my boundaries, because these are non-negotiable. You can only put your hands on me to keep me from being in harm's way, or terms of endearment to show pleasure. Other than that, if it's for any form of abuse and neglect and maltreatment, Houston, we have a problem. And it's not going to turn out well for you. Just saying.
Hey.
So I put that out there from from the very beginning of our conversation. So then people will say to me now, well, Dr. Pitts, how do you impose boundaries on adults, whether it be on a romantic partner or parents or siblings or friends or whatever the case may be? And I said, perhaps I'm the wrong person to ask that, because I'm not afraid to be by myself. I don't have abandonment issues today, so you don't get to treat me like a piece of trash because we hang on the same family tree or because we've been going together for 5-6 years. If you're treating me like trash, you have communicated to me that I'm not safe with you, so you no longer are entitled to have intimate access to me. Access denied. It's not rocket science.
Talk about it. Listen.
And you're holding on to trash. So you're making it impossible for God to get the blessings that he has for you, because you won't let go of the stuff that you were never intended to hold on to.
Ooh, that right there. I think we're going to close right there. That was like a good way to close. Ooh, I do want to add this before we even to go into it, but you said so many key things today, and I think it's very important for all of us as a people to go through these steps. Take this time to figure out who you are. What is it that you're lacking? Not even as far as like lacking in a relationship, but like, what are you lacking as a person? In yourself. And go through that, because it makes such a difference. A person who's done the work. I mean, I continue to do it daily. I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy.
It is a daily work.
It's a daily work. It's like the same way walking with Christ. It's you have your good days and you have your bad days. But making the choice to say, I'm gonna break the cycle. I'm gonna change this. I'm not gonna fall in the same footsteps. I want something better. I want something healthier. I deserve something better. That makes the difference in everything that you do. And it's so important. And once you make that step, and once you make that daily commitment to do that, it makes your life feel so much lighter. And then some people call me, I'm a no nonsense person. I'd be like, listen, I can do bad all by myself. Listen, listen, it's been almost 8 years being by myself, and the stuff that I've learned about myself being single for 8 years and not having to go through it. I've been through friendships and even not even relationships, but people that try to talk to me. I'm like, I can see trash from a mile away. I'm like,
from a romantic standpoint, people need to understand that sexual intimacy complicates things. If that's the foundation of the relationship, you are in for a rude awakening, a very, very rude awakening, and you really are setting yourself up to deal with a whole lot of heartache and pain, because you really don't know the person that you're with, because the foundation of the relationship is based on the romance, and that's not healthy, nor is it wise.
Right. Ooh, we had some great key takeaways, but make sure everybody who is listening take these conversations, don't take it for granted. Really pay attention and learn something, because like I said, you saw last week, I learned something every time I sit down and talk to you. I learn something new every time. But make sure you tune in every other Wednesday to Math Media. to see a sneak preview, but to see the full interview, go to The Real One TV on YouTube or follow me on Instagram at TheRealMichaeliaaa with 2 A's to find out more information. Thank you again for Dr. Lauren Pitts for coming and just giving us this good nuggets. We just teaching this young buck some things. And we'll see you guys on the next Healing Reflections.